Ever wonder what lurks just beyond the shadows? Those places you walk past every day, thinking they're safe until they whisper your name? Welcome to No Sleep Nightmares Reddit, where the dark doesn't just hide secrets, it devours them. Tonight, I've got a collection of bone-chilling tales that'll make you question every creak, every flicker, every cold spot in your life. We're diving into haunted cabins that vanish, mines that trap you in time, and stones that hunger for more than just your curiosity. Stick around, because the fourth story, it's about something you've probably seen or heard without even knowing it's watching you back. Before we plunge into the abyss, do me a solid, smash that like button, share this nightmare fuel, and hit subscribe to help me reach 1,000 sleepless souls. The more of you there are, the deeper I can dig into the horrors that keep us awake. Ready? Let's see if you can make it to the end without checking your locks. The Shenandoah Valley stretched out before me like a postcard, begging to be torn in half. The kind of place where the air smells of pine and regret, where the wind carries whispers you tell yourself are just leaves brushing against each other, until you realize there's no breeze. It was late October, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder why you ever thought a hike was a good idea. But this wasn't just any hike. This was our hike, mine and Emily's, our anniversary getaway. 5 years married, 5 years of her pretending my snoring wasn't a war crime, and me pretending her cooking wasn't a cry for help. We'd earned this escape, or so I thought. I'm Chris, by the way, 32, moderately fit if you squint, with a beard I keep because Emily says it makes me look rugged instead of just lazy. Emily's the real star here, 30, all sharp wit and sharper eyes, the kind of woman who can spot a lie from a mile away but still humors my terrible sense of direction. We'd been trudging through the forest for hours, the trail a muddy ribbon twisting deeper into the valley. The guy at the visitor center, a wiry old coot with a grin too wide for his face, had promised this path was secluded, perfect for a romantic retreat, he'd said, his voice dripping with the kind of cheer that makes you wonder what he's hiding. Are you sure this is the right way, Chris? Emily's voice cut through the crunch of leaves underfoot, a hint of worry threading through her usual calm. Her breath puffed out in little clouds, her cheeks pink from the chill. I squeezed her hand, warm against my cold fingers. Positive. The guy said this trail's the best-kept secret in Shenandoah. Just what we wanted, right? No Wi-Fi, no screaming kids, just us and the trees. She nodded, but her eyes flicked to the horizon where the sun was sinking faster than my confidence. The forest pressed in around us, dense and silent, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. I'd started to doubt myself too. Hours of walking and no sign of the promised scenic overlook. My legs ached, my boots were caked in mud, and the map in my pocket might as well have been a napkin doodle for all the help it was giving. Just as I opened my mouth to suggest turning back, swallowing my pride like a bitter pill, a gap in the trees revealed a clearing ahead, and there, nestled among the pines like a mirage, stood a log cabin. Chris, look! Emily's face lit up, doubt replaced by relief. Maybe they can give us directions. I exhaled a shaky laugh. Or a hot meal. I'd kill for something that isn't trail mix. The cabin was straight out of a fairy tale or a horror flick, depending on your mood. Rough-hewn logs stacked tight, a stone chimney puffing lazy curls of smoke, and windows glowing with warm golden light. Too perfect, really, for the middle of nowhere. My gut twisted, a little voice whispering that perfection in the wild usually comes with a catch. But exhaustion won out over instinct, and we trudged toward it, the promise of warmth pulling us like moths to a flame. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could graze the wood, the door creaked open. An elderly woman stood there, silver hair framing a face etched with laugh lines, her eyes twinkling like she'd been expecting us. "Well, hello there," she said, her voice a soothing balm against the forest's chill. "You two look like you could use a rest. Come in, come in." Emily and I swapped a glance. Every horror movie I'd ever seen screamed at me to run. Strangers in the woods offering hospitality. That's how you end up a lampshade. But her smile was so damn kind, and the scent of cinnamon wafting out hit me like a drug. My stomach growled loud enough to embarrass me, and Emily's shiver decided it. We stepped inside. The interior was a time capsule of coziness, crackling fire in the hearth, plush furniture that begged you to sink into it, and walls lined with faded photographs of smiling faces I didn't recognize. An elderly man rose from an armchair, his grizzled beard matching the woman's silver hair. "Harold, look who's come to visit." The woman, Martha, she introduced herself, called out. Harold nodded, his voice rough but warm. "You folks look half frozen. What brings you out here?" As Emily explained our anniversary hike, I felt the tension in my shoulders melt. Martha bustled off to the kitchen, promising soup, while Harold gestured to the sofa. We sank into it, the cushions swallowing us whole. The fire's heat seeped into my skin, chasing away the ache of the trail. I almost laughed at myself, paranoid over nothing. These people were saints, not serial killers. Martha returned with steaming bowls of soup, a rich, savory broth that smelled like heaven and tasted like redemption. I slurped it down, ignoring Emily's amused smirk. "You two are welcome to stay the night," Martha offered as she collected our bowls. "Too dark to be traipsing about now." "Bless you," Emily said, and I nodded, too full and drowsy to argue. The thought of hiking back through that cold, dark forest was a nightmare I'd happily skip. Martha led us to a guest room, a four-poster bed piled high with quilts, the kind of setup that promises dreams of sugar plums and not a single care. We climbed in, Emily curling against me, her warmth a tether in the strange night. Harold and Martha's soft voices drifted from downstairs, a lullaby that pulled me under. I woke to sunlight stabbing my eyes and the crunch of leaves beneath me. No ceiling, no quilts, just trees towering overhead, their branches clawing at a grey sky. I bolted upright, heart hammering. Emily stirred beside me, her eyes widening as she took in the forest floor, our backpacks pillowed under our heads. "Chris," she whispered, voice trembling, "what's going on? Where are we?" I scrambled to my feet, twigs snapping under my boots. "I don't know, this doesn't make sense." The cabin was gone, no chimney smoke, no warm light, just endless trees and a silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. We searched for an hour, shouting for Harold and Martha, scouring the clearing for any sign of the place we'd slept. Nothing. Not a splinter of wood, not a whiff of cinnamon. "Maybe we dreamed it," Emily said, but her voice cracked, betraying the lie. I shook my head. The soup's taste still lingered on my tongue, the fire's heat a ghost on my skin. It was too real to be a dream. Panic clawed at me as I spotted something through the trees. Our car, parked exactly where we'd left it yesterday, a few hundred yards away. "Emily, look!" My voice was a rasp. She followed my gaze, her face paling. "But that's impossible. We hiked for hours." We stumbled toward the car, the forest shifting around us. The air grew heavy, thick with a scent I couldn't place, something metallic, like rust or blood. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, too quick to catch. We drove home in silence, the hum of the engine a frail shield against the questions gnawing at us. Back in our apartment, Emily finally spoke, her eyes locked on mine. "Chris, what if it wasn't a cabin at all? What if it was something else?" I had no answer. As I held her, Martha's smile flashed in my mind, too wide, too perfect. Had we been lured in, fed, sheltered, only to be spat back out? One thing was certain. Shenandoah Valley wasn't just trees and trails anymore. Something waited there, patient and hungry, and I'd never trust a warm light in the woods again. But that's not where the story ends. Oh no, you didn't think I'd let you off that easy, did you? Buckle up, nightmares, because this is where the real fun begins. And let's rewind a bit. Back to that trail, back to the moment I should have listened to that little voice in my gut. See, Shenandoah's got a reputation if you know where to look. Old-timers at the diner near the park entrance, the ones with eyes like cloudy glass and hands trembling around their coffee mugs, they'll tell you things. Stories of hikers who vanish, only to turn up days later, babbling about cabins and kind strangers, strangers no one else ever finds. Take Jimmy Hargrove, for instance, local legend, missing since '87. Went in with a hunting rifle and a grin, came out 3 weeks later clawing at his own face, screaming about a woman who fed him soup that tasted like life itself. They locked him up in a psych ward, but he scratched maps into the walls, maps that led nowhere. Or Mary Ellen Pierce, a college kid who disappeared in '94. Found her boots a month later, laces still tied, but no sign of her. Her journal, recovered near the trailhead, had one last entry. The fire's so warm, but I can't feel my hands. I didn't know those stories then, wish I had. Maybe I'd have turned back when the trail started feeling less like a path and more like a noose tightening around our necks. But ignorance is bliss until it's a blade in your back. Let's paint the scene a little richer, shall we? That forest wasn't just quiet, it was dead. No birds chirping, no squirrels skittering, just the sound of our boots squelching in mud that smelled faintly of rot. The trees loomed like sentinels, their bark slick with something I told myself was dew, but glistened too red in the fading light. Emily's hand in mine was the only thing keeping me grounded, her pulse a faint drumbeat against my clammy skin. When we stumbled on that cabin, it wasn't just relief, it was salvation. Or so I thought. The door opening on its own should have been my first clue. Doors don't do that unless something's pulling the strings. Martha's voice, all honey and hearth, wrapped around us like a spiderweb. Soft, sticky, inescapable. Harold's grizzled charm was the perfect counterpoint, a gruff teddy bear to her sweet matron. Yin and yang luring us in with a symmetry too neat for reality. Inside, the air was thick, not just with cinnamon, but something sour underneath, like milk gone bad. The fire popped and hissed, spitting embers that danced too long in the air before winking out. Those photos on the walls? I didn't look close then, but memory's a cruel editor. Later, I'd swear some of those faces were watching us, their eyes following every spoonful of soup we swallowed. That soup, God, that soup. It wasn't just good, it was alive. Warmth flooded my veins, chasing away the cold, the fear, the doubt. I felt like I could run a marathon, like every ache in my body had been scrubbed clean. Emily's eyes sparkled as she ate, her laugh brighter than I'd heard in months. "This is better than my mum's," she said, and I snorted. "That's not saying much. Your mum's cooking could kill a raccoon." Dark humour, our little shield against the weirdness creeping in. But the weirdness didn't stop. Martha's hands as she took our bowls, too smooth for her age, nails too long, curling like talons. Harold's stories of the old days in the valley, vague and looping, like a record skipping. And the guest room, those quilts weren't just heavy, they pressed down like hands holding us in place. I slept, yeah, but it wasn't rest. Dreams clawed at me, faceless figures in the woods, a fire that burned cold, a voice whispering my name in a tone that wasn't Martha's or Harold's, but mine. Waking up outside was the sucker punch. The forest smelled different now, wet earth and something sharp, like ozone after a storm. Our backpacks were damp, zippers rusted overnight. Emily's hair was tangled with pine needles, her skin clammy as she clutched my arm. "Chris, I can still taste the soup," she whispered, and my stomach lurched. So could I. We searched, yelled until our throats were raw, kicked at roots and rocks like they'd cough up answers. The clearing was a lie, flat, featureless, no sign a cabin had ever stood there. But the ground, it was wrong, soft in spots like it had been turned over and patted down. I dug with my hands, frantic, and found nothing but worms. Too many worms wriggling like they'd just feasted, the car appearing so close. That was the final twist of the knife. Hours of hiking, and we were back where we started, like the forest had chewed us up and spat us out. Driving home, the rearview mirror showed nothing but trees until it didn't. A flicker, a shape, too tall, too thin, gone when I blinked. Emily saw it too. Her gasp told me that. Back home, the nightmare didn't end. Our apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon for days, a taunt we couldn't scrub out. Emily started sleepwalking, muttering about the kind ones who needed us back. I'd find her at the door, hand on the knob, eyes glassy. Me? I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the floorboards was Harold's heavy tread, every flicker of light Martha's smile stretching too wide. Then the photos came. Old Polaroids slipped under our door, no postmark, no note. Us in the cabin, laughing, eating, sleeping. Shots from angles no camera could have caught. One showed me standing outside, staring at the cabin as it dissolved into mist, my face blank. Another had Emily by the fire, but her shadow. It wasn't hers. Too long, too jagged, with fingers that stretched beyond the frame. I burned them. Didn't help. The dreams got worse. Martha's voice now, soft and insistent. "You left too soon, dears. Come back. We're waiting." Last night, I woke to Emily gone. Her side of the bed was cold, her boots missing. The car was still in the lot, but a trail of muddy footprints led to the woods behind our building, woods that weren't there a week ago. I'm going after her. Got my flashlight, my knife, and a recorder. Maybe you'll hear this someday. If you're listening, don't trust the trails, don't trust the warmth. And if you see a cabin that shouldn't be there, run. Run until your lungs give out, because whatever's waiting inside isn't human, it's hungry, and it's patient. Well, wasn't that a cozy little nightmare? A cabin that lures you in, then spits you out like yesterday's leftovers? Shenandoah's got some dark tricks up its sleeve, but don't relax yet, nightmares, because we're heading deeper into the shadows. Up next, the Hollow Man, where an old coal mine doesn't just bury its secrets, it buries you. Loving these chills? Hit that subscribe button for No Sleep Nightmares Reddit and drop a comment. Ever seen a cabin that wasn't there? Let's hear it. Now grab your flashlight. We're descending into the dark. The gravel crunched under my boots like bones snapping in a vice as I stepped out of the rental car, the late afternoon sun bleeding red across the jagged skyline of Kaymoor, West Virginia. The air hit me hard, thick with damp earth and the faint, sour tang of rust, like the world had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. I adjusted the straps of my camera bag, the weight of it digging into my shoulder, and took a long, shaky breath. This was it. Kaymoor, the crown jewel of my passion project, a documentary on the abandoned coal towns that once clawed life from these mountains. I'd spent months planning this, poring over maps and old photos, dreaming of capturing the ghosts of a bygone era on film. But standing there, staring at the skeletal remains of rusted machinery and crumbling buildings, I felt less like a filmmaker and more like a trespasser who'd just kicked a hornet's nest. I'm Mark Thompson, by the way, 34. scruffy enough to pass for a hipster if I didn't smell like stale coffee and desperation most days. I've got a knack for finding beauty in decay, or so I tell myself when the bills pile up, and the YouTube algorithm screws me over again. Kaymoor wasn't just another shoot, it was personal. My granddad worked these mines back in the 20s, swinging a pickaxe until his lungs turned black and his stories turned wild. He'd ramble about hollow men who walked the tunnels, men who weren't men anymore, their voices echoing long after they should have died. Kid me thought it was just senile nonsense. Adult me? Well, I was about to find out. The 821 steps down to Kaymoor Bottom loomed ahead, a rusted staircase snaking into the forest like a dare. Each step groaned under my weight, the metal flaking away in red dust that coated my hands and stuck to my jeans. The canopy swallowed the light as I descended, branches clawing at the sky, their shadows twitching like fingers on the edge of my vision. By the time I hit bottom, the silence was a physical thing, thick, suffocating, broken only by the drip of water somewhere deep in the ruins. The cold tipple towered over me, a hulking beast of twisted steel, its silhouette jagged against the bruise-colored dusk. I set up my tripod near the powder house, its stone walls still standing like a stubborn middle finger to time, and framed my first shot. The lens caught the decay perfectly, the rot, the rust, the emptiness. Then I saw him. A flicker in the corner of my eye, gone when I turned. I froze, heart thudding against my ribs, and told myself it was a deer. Had to be. Except deer don't wear tattered overalls or stare at you with eyes like pits. He was just there, standing by the tipple, gaunt and streaked with coal dust, his face a mask of hollows and sharp edges. My mouth went dry as he spoke, voice rasping like a file on bone. "You shouldn't be here." I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. Hey, I'm Mark, doing a documentary on the old mining towns. You a local?" His lips twitched into something that might have been a smile if it didn't make my skin crawl. "You could say that. Name's Tom. Worked these mines back in 25, my brain stuttered. 1925, no way. The guy couldn't be more than 60, and that was generous. But his clothes, faded denim, patched and threadbare, looked like they'd been pulled from a museum. I chalked it up to eccentricity, some hermit playing dress-up for kicks. "That must have been something," I said, fumbling for my notebook. "Mind showing me around? I'd love to hear your stories." Tom nodded, slow and deliberate, then turned toward the mine entrance, a black moor carved into the hillside, exhaling cold, damp air that smelled of wet stone and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. I followed, curiosity outweighing the alarm bells clanging in my head. He talked as we walked, his words painting a picture so vivid I could almost hear the clatter of coal carts, the shouts of men swallowed by the dark. Back-breaking shifts, cave-ins that crushed more than just rock, a company script system that owned your soul before you ever swung a pick. His voice had a rhythm, a cadence that pulled me in, made me forget the chill creeping up my spine. We stopped at the tunnel's mouth. Tom pointed into the blackness. "In there, that's where you'll find what you're looking for." I hesitated, the beam of my flashlight trembling as I aimed it into the void. "What's in there?" "Truth," he said, and stepped back, melting into the shadows like smoke. My gut screamed at me to turn around, but my feet, damn traitors, carried me forward. The tunnel swallowed me whole, the light bouncing off walls slick with moisture and veined with coal. A few yards in, something glinted on a rocky ledge, a small, leather-bound book, coated in dust so fine it puffed up like ash when I grabbed it. My name stared back at me from the cover. Mark Thompson, embossed in faded gold. My hands shook as I opened it, pages crackling under my fingers. handwritten entries detailing a miner's life in Kaymoor, my life, somehow. The last page stopped me cold. A cave-in, a struggle, death. Dated tomorrow, 1926. "Tom!" I spun, voice echoing off the stone. "What is this?" No answer, just darkness, thicker now, pressing in. The entrance was gone, replaced by a wall of black. Panic clawed at my throat as I stumbled deeper, flashlight flickering like it knew something I didn't. The air grew heavy, laced with that sweet rot stench, and the temperature plunged until my breath fogged in front of me. My foot caught on something, a miner's helmet, old and dented, its carbide lamp still attached. I jammed it on, desperation overriding reason, and flicked the lamp. It sputtered to life, casting a weak, yellow glow. The chamber I'd stumbled into was a graveyard. Mummified bodies slumped against the walls, their skin leathery and taut, mouths frozen in silent screams. Pickaxes and lanterns littered the floor, rusted to ruin. And there, against the far wall, was me, or something wearing my face. Skeletal, clad in miner's gear, clutching a pickaxe in bony hands, its empty socket staring right through me. I stumbled back, a scream dying in my throat. This wasn't real, couldn't be. But the journal, the helmet, the corpse, they all sang the same twisted tune. Then the walls shook. Dust rained down, the sound of pickaxes hammering the stone growing louder, closer. Voices, muffled, overlapping, filled the air, calling my name in tones I recognized but couldn't place. I ran, lamp bouncing, the tunnel stretching into eternity. Behind me, the roar of collapsing rock chased my heels, air rushing past like a dying breath. I burst out into daylight, collapsing on the ground as dust billowed from the shaft. But when I looked up, Kaymoor Bottom was gone. In its place was a bustling mining camp, men in period clothes, a sign reading, "Welcome to Kaymoor, Est, 1899. Tom was there, younger now, his face unlined, but his eyes still hollow. "You all right, friend? Look like you've seen a ghost." He helped me up, brushing coal dust from my shirt. "You must be the new fella, Mark, right? We've been expecting you." I couldn't speak. The journal was still in my hand, its weight a shackle. As Tom led me toward the bunkhouse, the camp buzzed around me, alive, real, impossible. Was I trapped, destined to relive this hell? Or could I change it? The answers waited in the dark, and I had a sinking feeling I'd find them whether I wanted to or not. But let's not kid ourselves. That's just the warm-up. Kaymoor doesn't let go that easy, and neither do I. Picture this. Those 821 steps weren't just a descent into a ghost town. They were a plunge into a meat grinder of time and terror. The metal wasn't just rusted, it was weeping, streaked with something dark and sticky that smeared my palms when I gripped the rail. The forest didn't just block the light, it ate it, swallowing every ray until the world was a smear of grey and green, the kind of murk that makes you wonder if your eyes are lying to you. I should have known something was off when I got there. The rental car's radio had fritzed out a mile from the trailhead, spitting static and snatches of voices, old voices, gravelly and pleading, begging me to turn back. I laughed it off because who doesn't love a little foreshadowing with their road trip? Dark humour's my armour, but it's paper thin against what Kaymoor had in store. Tom wasn't just some quirky local. That first look at him, his skin too tight, his eyes too deep, should have sent me running. But no, I'm Mark, the idiot with a camera and a death wish, chasing ghosts for likes and subscribes. His stories weren't just vivid, they were alive, curling into my skull like smoke, filling my lungs with the grit of coal dust I hadn't breathed. When he pointed into that mine, his finger wasn't just pointing, it was beckoning, a bony hook reeling me in. That tunnel? It wasn't a tunnel, it was a throat wet and pulsing, the walls glistening with something that wasn't water, too thick, too red. The The sweet rot smell wasn't fruit, it was flesh, old and soft, clinging to the air like a lover who won't let go. The journal wasn't just a prop, it was a script, my script, written in ink that smelled faintly of copper. Every word I read sank into me, heavy as lead, rewriting my pulse to match its rhythm. And those bodies in the chamber, God, those bodies, not just mummies but shells, hollowed out like cicada husks, their insides scooped clean. My doppelganger wasn't just a corpse, it moved, a twitch of a finger, a tilt of the head, before the light caught it wrong and it froze again. The pickaxes weren't mining, they were singing, a chorus of metal on stone, calling me deeper, promising I'd join the choir. Running out wasn't escape, it was a reset. Stepping into 1899 wasn't a fluke, it was the punchline to a joke I didn't get until too late. The camp wasn't bustling, it was watching. Every miner's glance lingered too long, every smile showed too many teeth. Tom's "expecting you" wasn't friendly, it was a threat, a promise that I'd been here before, would be here again, forever. The bunkhouse wasn't a refuge, it was a cage, its walls stained with handprints that matched mine, faded but fresh. Let's talk about the others because I wasn't alone in that hell. There was Ellie the cook, a wiry woman with a laugh like breaking glass, who ladled out stew that tasted too good, too rich, like it had been simmering since the town was born. She'd wink at me, her left eye milky and blind, and mutter, "Eat up, Marky, you'll need your strength." Then there was Jed, the shift boss, broad as a barn, voice like a landslide, who clapped me on the back hard enough to bruise and said, "You're one of us now, boy, ain't no quitting." Their cheer was a mask, and underneath it I saw flickers, skin too loose, eyes too empty, like they were wearing themselves wrong. Days bled into nights, or maybe they didn't. Time in Kaymoor wasn't a line, it was a knot tightening around my throat. I worked the mines because what else could I do? Swinging a pickaxe that felt too familiar, my hands blistering, then callousing overnight. The coal wasn't coal, it glittered like obsidian, warm to the touch, whispering my name when I shoveled it. The tunnels shifted, walls closing in, then stretching out, leading me back to that chamber again and again. Each time, the bodies were different. New faces, old faces, my face, grinning at me like I'd told the best joke in the world. I tried to fight it, plotted escape, hoarded tools, scratched maps into the bunkhouse floor with a nail. But every morning, the scratches were gone, the tools back in the shed, and Ellie's stew was waiting, steaming and inevitable. Jed caught me once, sneaking toward the steps at dawn. "Going somewhere, Marky?" he rumbled, his shadow swallowing mine. "Ain't no leaving. You're hollow now, same as us." Hollow. That word stuck, burrowed into me. Granddad's stories weren't tales, they were warnings. The hollow men weren't just miners, they were things. Shells filled with something older than the mountains, something that fed on time, on lives, on me. I felt it growing. Emptiness where my fear should have been, a hunger I couldn't name. My reflection in a cracked mirror showed it, eyes sinking, skin tightening, a grin I didn't feel stretching my face. One night, or day, who knows, the whistle blew, sharp and wrong, echoing inside my skull. The camp emptied, miners shambling toward the mine like moths to a flame. I followed, legs moving without my say-so, the journal clutched to my chest like a Bible. The tunnel was waiting, wider now, its walls pulsing with veins of that glittering coal. At the heart of it stood Tom, not young anymore, not old, just there, his face a patchwork of others. Ellie's blind eye, Jed's crooked nose, my own jawline. "Welcome home," he said, voice a chorus of every miner I'd met, every voice I'd heard. "You found the truth." The chamber was alive now, bodies rising, shedding their husks, reaching for me with hands that weren't hands, but claws, tendrils, shadows. The coal glowed, a heartbeat in the dark, and I felt it. My own heartbeat slowing, sinking, stopping. I wasn't Mark anymore, or maybe I'd never been. I was hollow, a shell for something vast and ancient, something that laughed as it filled me. I don't know how I'm telling you this. Maybe I'm not. Maybe this is the journal talking, or the coal, or the thing wearing my skin. But if you're listening, if you find Kaymoor on a map and think it's just another ruin, don't climb those steps. Don't breathe that air, because the hollow men are waiting and they've got room for one more. That's Kaymoor for you. Time doesn't just trap you, it hollows you out till there's nothing left but echoes. Hope you're still breathing after that one, because we're not done. Next up, the hungry stones, rocks that don't just sit pretty in the Alleghenies, they bite back and they're starving. If this is keeping you up, smash that subscribe for No Sleep Nightmares Reddit and tell me in the comments, what's the creepiest place you've ever explored? Let's keep the terror rolling. The stones are waiting. The wind howled through the Allegheny Mountains like a banshee with a grudge, slicing across my face as I hauled my pack higher on my shoulders. The air up here was sharp, pine-scented and frigid, laced with a faint metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat. I'm Rachel, 32, a geologist with a Ph.D. and a bad habit of chasing rocks that don't play nice. This trip wasn't just fieldwork. It was obsession. The outcrops I'd spotted on a topo map last month were unlike anything in my textbooks, jagged, black, and veined with something that gleamed too bright for sandstone. The Alleghenies were old, born from the Appalachian orogeny millions of years back, but these stones, they felt older, too old, like they'd been waiting. I set up camp at the base of a craggy ridge, the kind of spot where the ground crunched underfoot, not with gravel, but with something brittle that snapped like dry bones. The rocks loomed above me, their surfaces slick and rippling in the fading daylight, catching the last rays like oil slicks on water. I shook my head, chalking it up to exhaustion. 12 hours hiking with a pack full of gear, hammers, chisels, a spectrometer that cost more than my rent would make anyone see things. I pitched my tent, the nylon flapping like a trapped bird, and crawled inside, the cold seeping through the floor into my bones. Night fell hard, the kind of dark that presses against your eyes until you're not sure they're open. The usual forest soundtrack, crickets chirping, owls hooting, leaves rustling, was gone, replaced by a silence so thick it buzzed in my ears. I zipped my sleeping bag tighter, breath fogging in the dim glow of my lantern. Then I heard it. A whisper, faint and slippery, sliding through the tent walls. Rachel. My name hissed low, like wind through a crack. I bolted upright, heart slamming against my ribs. "Who's there?" I called, voice cracking. Nothing. Just that damn silence mocking me. I told myself it was the wind, had to be. These mountains were full of tricks, hollows that caught sound and threw it back twisted. But as I lay there, the whispers grew, threading through the dark like spider silk. "Rachel, come closer." Not one voice, but many, overlapping, some soft, some sharp, all hungry. I fumbled for my flashlight, hands shaking, and unzipped the tent flap. The beam cut through the night, landing on the rocks. They moved, not much, just a ripple, a shudder, like something breathing under the surface. I blinked, hard, fatigue, had to be fatigue. Then the deer came. A small buck, antlers barely nubs, stepped into the light, eyes glassy and blank. It didn't run, didn't twitch, just walked, slow and deliberate, toward the stones. My breath caught as it reached the nearest outcrop. The rock opened, not cracked, not split, but parted, like lips peeling back. The deer didn't scream, didn't fight, it just dissolved, sinking into the stone, its form blurring into mist that the rock swallowed whole. I dropped the flashlight, bile rising in my throat. These weren't rocks, they were alive, predatory, ancient and hungry. And that pull I'd felt all day, that itch to get closer, it wasn't curiosity. It was them. My legs moved before my brain caught up, stumbling toward the stones like a moth to a flame. I fought it, clawing at the dirt, but the pull was relentless, a hook in my gut dragging me in. The cold stone brushed my fingers, and I screamed as it started to take me, skin tingling, then numbing, my arms sinking into the rock like it was clay. That's when I snapped. Years of science, of logic, went out the window.
I was prey, nothing more, and these stones were the apex predators of a food chain I didn't even know existed. My last thought as the rock closed around me was a bitter laugh. Guess I finally found something worth a paper, if I live to write it.
But oh, sweet nightmares, that's not where it ends. You think a geologist goes down without a fight? Or that the Alleghenies let their snacks slip away so easy? Let's rewind, paint this picture bloody and vivid, because these mountains don't mess around, and neither do I. The hike up wasn't just tiring, it was a slog through hell's waiting room. The trail was a mess of roots and mud, slick with something that smelled like copper and rot, sticking to my boots in clumps I didn't dare inspect too close. The air wasn't crisp, it was heavy, thick, with a dampness that coated my lungs, made every breath a chore. My pack rattled with gear, the clink of metal a heartbeat in the silence, until the silence swallowed that too. The trees weren't just trees, they leaned in, branches gnarled and twisted like fingers, frozen mid-grab, their bark peeling in strips that fluttered without wind. I'd picked this spot because of the anomaly. Those rocks didn't match the geology. Sandstone and metamorphosed shale dominated the Alleghenies, but these, black as pitch, veined with a silvery gleam that pulsed when you stared too long. I'd laughed it off as a trick of light when I first saw the photos, some amateur's bad filter. Up close though, they weren't funny, they were wrong, radiating a heat that didn't warm, a hum you felt in your teeth. I set up my spectrometer, hands steady from years of practice, but my readings were gibberish, elements I couldn't name, energy spikes that made no sense. Night one, I didn't sleep, couldn't. The whispers started soft, teasing like kids playing a prank. Rachel, over here. I ignored them, buried my head in my bag, but they crept closer, louder, a chorus of voices I swore I knew. My mum's soft drawl, my ex's snarky bite, my old prof's dry rasp. By midnight, they weren't whispering. They were calling, insistent, needy. I crawled out, flashlight trembling, and saw the rocks shift, not an illusion, not fatigue, but a slow, deliberate ripple, like skin stretching over muscle. The deer was the kicker.
I watched it melt, its flesh peeling away in strands that the stones sucked up like spaghetti. No blood, no bones, just gone, leaving a faint shimmer on the rock's surface. My stomach heaved, but my legs, they betrayed me, shuffling forward, drawn by a pull I couldn't fight. It wasn't hypnosis, it was hunger, theirs and mine, a feedback loop of want. The stone was cold at first, then warm, then hot, searing my skin as it took me in.
I clawed at it, nails splintering, but it was like fighting quicksand. Every move sank me deeper. Then I heard them, the others. Voices inside the stone, not whispers now, but screams, pleas, laughter. Join us, Rachel. It's warm here. You'll see. My arm was gone to the elbow, my shoulder next, and I felt it, my essence, myself, unraveling, feeding something vast and endless. I laughed, a cracked, desperate sound. Well, shit. Guess I'm the fossil now. Dark humor's my lifeline, but it didn't stop the stone from swallowing me whole. Darkness. Then light, faint, flickering like a dying bulb. I wasn't gone, not yet. I woke, or thought I did, Inside the rock, a cavern of black crystal, walls pulsing with that silver gleam. My body was there, sort of intact, but wrong, skin too tight, fingers too long. The air was thick, syrupy, tasting of salt and decay. And I wasn't alone. Shapes moved in the glow, people, or what was left of them. A man in a miner's helmet, face half melted, grinned at me. A woman in a flapper dress, eyes gouged out, hummed a tune I couldn't place. A kid, maybe 10, clutched a teddy bear that dripped black ooze, giggling as he watched me. "Welcome," the miner rasped, voice wet and gurgling. "Been waiting for you." "Where am I?" my voice echoed, sharp against the hum. "Inside," the woman said, her blind sockets weeping tar. "Where the stones keep us." "They're hungry," the kid chirped, squeezing his bear until it squeaked, a sound like a scream cut short. "Always hungry, you'll see." I stumbled back, or tried to, but the floor shifted, sucking at my boots. The walls pulsed faster, the silver veins glowing brighter, and I felt it, a tug, not just on my body but my mind, pulling memories out like threads. My first dig, sweaty and triumphant. Mom's meatloaf, burnt but loved. That fight with Jake, the one that ended us. They unraveled, fed the stones, and I shrank, hollowed out. But I'm a fighter, stubborn as the rocks I study. I grabbed a chisel from my belt, still there somehow, and stabbed at the wall. It bled, a thick, black ichor that burned my hands, but it gave, cracking under the blow. The shapes lunged, clawing at me, but I kept going, carving a path through the stone. The voices screamed, anger now, not hunger, and the cavern shook, crystals shattering like glass. I ran or crawled or fell until light, real light, hit my face. I burst out onto the ridge, gasping, the tent still there, dawn breaking over the mountains. The rocks stood silent still, but I saw it, a faint ripple, a twitch, like they were waking up again. My pack was gone, my hands raw, but I was out. I laughed, ragged and wild. "Take that, you prehistoric bastards." Except it didn't end there. Back home, the nightmares started. Stones whispering my name, hands pulling me under. My apartment smelled of salt and rot no matter how much I scrubbed. My skin itched, flaking in patches that glittered silver under the light. Last week, I found a pebble on my desk, black, veined, warm. It wasn't there before. Yesterday, I saw her, Mom or something wearing her face, standing by my window. "Come back, Rachel," she said, voice too sweet, too wrong. "They miss you." I locked the door, but the whispers followed, louder now inside my head. "I'm writing this because I don't know how long I've got. The stones aren't done. They're patient, eternal, and they've marked me. If you're listening, don't go to the Alleghenies. Don't touch the black rocks. They're not just stone, they're alive, and they're starving. And if you hear your name on the wind, run. Run until your legs give out, because once they taste you, they never let go. I should know, I'm still feeding them, one memory at a time. There you have it, nightmares. 3 slices of terror straight from the shadows of America's wilds. A cabin that vanishes like a bad dream, leaving you questioning every warm light you see. A mine that doesn't just take your breath but your entire damn existence. And stones that hunger for more than just your footsteps. They want your soul. The wilderness isn't just alive out there. It's watching, waiting, and oh so patient. If these tales clawed their way under your skin, smash that like button to let me know you survived. Subscribe to No Sleep Nightmares Reddit if you're brave, or foolish, enough to stick around for more, and drop a comment. What's your own brush with the dark? Your story might just haunt our next video. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and your ears open, because the night's still whispering, and it knows your name. Sweet nightmares, folks. Sleep tight if you dare.